You can't make people open up to cultures or art forms that they don't know anything about or aren't interested in. And yet, unless you can expose people across cultural and class and racial lines to, let's say, rap, how are they ever going to get over this, the preconceptions, the fears, the images that they immediately associate with those things? It's not like you can force it on them, and and if you don't listen to certain radio stations or listen to certain musical performers or whatever, you just aren't going to get that exposure.
Right, and by the way, I'm not convincing anyone in here to become a fan of rap music. I have a lot of, even as I listen to rap music and listen to a lot of it, I'm not fond of all of it. I have my issues with it too. But what happens is the lack of knowledge about this is making jurors rely on perceptions and stereotypes that they have about this form of artistic expression without proper knowledge in which to interpret the lyrics. I liken it to never having seen a horror film before. Okay, let's say you've never seen a horror film, and then I take you to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's the impact that introducing lyrics has on jurors. Because if they don't understand rap or gangster rap, and they see the lyrics or the videos come on, they have no context within which to make sense of it all. That's where expert witness come in my opinion, and I see it as a valuable resource, because what jurors are being told by prosecutors, and prosecutors may believe this, is that this isn't art, this is confession. This isn't rhyme, this isn't artistic expression, this is someone bragging about his crimes or confessing to his crimes in his lyrics. And my goal when I testify in these cases is, look, I'm not here to say whether the person's guilty or not guilty. I don't want to know about, I'm here to simply inform the jurors about what rap music and gangster rap music is so that they can make an informed decision about those lyrics or those videos. So I'm not saying they need to learn to like it or they need to become fans, but if they are going to make a decision that's going to impact someone's life, in the case of Tiny Do, we're talking about charges that would have put him in prison for life. Some knowledge of what the conventions of rap music are must be present so that they can say, okay, this seemed very startling to me, but if I know that this is what rap music is and does, right? It's like horror films. If we know that there's going to be blood, guts, and gore, it's not as surprising when you see it. If you don't know that, it will have a very prejudicial impact. So my thing is the evidence is very prejudicial. The prejudicial impact of the rap lyrics evidence outweighs the probative value, and it should not be allowed in court unless an argument can be made that the probative value outweighs the prejudicial impact.
In the case of Tiny Do specifically, the district attorney was not saying that Tiny Do's rap lyrics were a confession to any crime. Their argument was these crimes had taken place by a gang that they said he was a member of. Therefore, his music benefited from it. And the irony of them choosing the album they did, No Safety, was it was a free mixtape you could download online. So sales weren't impacted. There was no monetary value that was added to his pocket. So in that case, that's really just a character assassination. And in my view, feeding into deep and sad and long stereotypes we have about young black males.
Thank you, Dr. Kubrin, for taking the time to be out here and share your research. Frankly, I haven't been able to read into all your past research, but I was wondering if you could share with us if you have any insights as to how we as a community could change the framework of this us versus them mentality, because that in itself I see as a big handicap in the community, even taking one step forward, because we can have these meetings all day long, but if we don't really do something about it, take even just some of the comments that I've heard, some of the language used where it's, if the police come, uh-oh. I mean, I see that as a stereotype in itself, as how the system is stereotyping against African Americans. So that kind of language, how do we move forward, if you have any insights on that?
Oh, that's the $1 million question. That's such a great question, and that's what I'm spending my career trying to answer. So my short answer to you is I don't have the answer. If I did, I'd be doing it. I mean, for me, one of the biggest challenges has been getting outside of my small academic circle, my circle of peers that get this and understand this, and trying to bring this out into the community. And that's why I've done talks and written op-eds. That's totally foreign for me, because I think there's too much of a divide between the scholarship and the practice. And, you know, as scholar, I wasn't trained in making my findings relevant for the community or in community activism. And this is why I absolutely welcome partnerships with community organizations and others. I don't know what's happening at the local. So for me to sit and sort of say what needs to be done in a given community, I couldn't even begin to answer that. But what I can do is provide resources, research, and the answers to some of the key questions based on my studies to begin to kind of focus in and answer those questions. So, and that's what I've been trying to do, is really get outside academia, get outside the journals that nobody really reads except other academics, and make the research accessible. One of the ways I've tried to do that is when I started to get asked to testify in these cases, attorneys said, I know these lyrics are causing the jurors to find these folks guilty. I know it's the lyrics, they're prejudicial. What evidence do you have that that's happening? And there was no studies being done. There's lots of experimental studies on all things related to race and stereotypes, but nothing on rap lyrics in particular. So I immediately said, we need studies on this. And so now myself and several graduate students and other faculty at UCR are conducting this experimental research to determine what is the impact of including these lyrics in these trials. So in this way, I'm having real-life problems inform my research as opposed to sitting up and figuring out, you know, what I think is important to research. It's coming from the ground up. And so that's been very humbling for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm curious if there has been any significant data on the criminalization of lyrics by white rap artists or even rap artists of other cultures.
That's a great question. So there's about 2-3 cases that have involved white rappers, okay? One of the cases was Alanis that made it to the US Supreme Court. He had posted very angry words to his ex-wife on Facebook in the form of his alter ego. I think it was his alter ego was Tone Doogie or something like that, rap guy, very influenced by Eminem. Anyway, other than that though, it's mostly, almost entirely, and I'm talking here a couple hundred cases, young African American or Latino men. So, and it's not just young African American or Latino men, it's young African American Latino men from inner city communities. So this isn't happening with big time rappers. I mean, it is on occasion, very, very infrequently. But this is primarily young aspiring rappers from these impoverished communities that are, like I said, trying to see rap as a way out. So it's very difficult to disentangle. I mean, one question I get asked a lot is this race? Is this rap? And my answer is it's both of them going on. And it's very difficult to kind of disentangle the two because the two are so tightly correlated or highly associated in people's minds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you both for having the courage to stand up here and address really a sensitive issue. And I agree with your first comment is that it is literally embarrassing to have two white women lead a discussion about race, but it doesn't surprise me for San Diego. With that said, you know, you folks are dealing with a small portion of the big issue, and the big issue is racism. The big issue is, the young man just asked, what can be done? You know, bigotry is a learned behavior. We don't come into this earth hating everybody or each other. So a learned behavior has to be an unlearned behavior. So I'd love to see as a solution more work going on in the elementary schools and in the kindergartens and in the younger ages, so we're not dealing with this problem 30 years from now.
Could
Right.
not agree more.
Right? So you know, I live in Southeast San Diego. I know what's going on over there, and you are absolutely right on the money. And the way that the relationship is between the police department and our community is dismal. And we need more real community policing and not just lip service. And that means more community members on panels and on commissions in our city to address this kind of stuff. And a better block. There you go. That's a Southeastern thing. And thank you very much. I didn't really have a question.
Can I respond to that? Because I think your points are very well taken. I mean, one of the things I encourage you to do is read the book, Privileged Places, Race, Residence, and the Structure of Opportunity, because I didn't have time to really get into that today. But one of the key points that we make in that book, I mean, rap on trial is a very specific issue that is reflective, exactly as you said, of a broader set of problems in our society. And what we do in the book is we identify sort of the broader forces, everything from suburban sprawl to gentrification to deindustrialization, segregation, economic inequality, along with policies, race-based policies that can be very problematic, like redlining and disinvestment in communities and all of that, and how all of these policies create the neighborhood structure that we have throughout the United States. I also talk a lot about criminal justice policy there. So in the book, we spend a lot of time kind of doing the setup of why are race, place, and privilege so connected. By the way, literally this morning as I was having breakfast, looking over my notes for this talk, just to kind of emphasize my bigger point of this talk, which is the nexus of race, place, and privilege. I don't know if you all saw in the Washington Post today, an article. The title of the article is "The One Thing Rich Parents Do for Their Kids That Makes All the Difference." So I asked my husband, I said, what do you think, what is the one thing? And he said, tutoring. And I asked a few friends throughout the day, what do you think it is? Someone said, you know, this or that or the other. You know what the answer is? They can buy their children pricey homes in nice neighborhoods with good school districts. And here's the opening line to this. I mean, I cannot stress how important the race, place, privilege nexus is. Wealthy parents are famously pouring more and more into their children, widening the gap in who has access to piano lessons was one my friend said. They said music lessons. Okay, widening the gap in who has access to piano lessons and math tutors and French language camp. The biggest investment the rich can make in their kids, though, one with equally profound consequences for the poor, has less to do with enrichment than real estate. They can buy their children pricey homes in nice neighborhoods with good school districts. And the article goes on to talk about what it means for life chances for young kids to grow up in a wealthy neighborhood. And it impacts every facet of their lives, not just education, not just their health and well-being, not just their earnings opportunities, but it affects the probability they'll wind up in the criminal justice system, die at an early age. I mean, the outcomes, the different outcomes that neighborhoods impact is unbelievable. And we talk about that in detail in the book. So I agree with you, and I wish I had more time to share that today.
How you doing? I do have a question, but I do have a statement as well. Race, are we so different? Yes and no. Like, I'm black, some of you are white, Latino, or whatever may have you here. So we're different in that sense, but we're all humans, right? Some people like raisin toast with butter. Some people like bagels. I like raisin toast with butter. That's why I went with that. So race, are we so different? Yes and no. We all are humans. And the other thing I want to say is the gentleman came up and he asked the question of what can be done? What can be done differently? And I think that comes down to you. Every single person sitting here has to look in the mirror or look at the person sitting to the left of you or to the right of you. Are you volunteering in your community? Are you volunteering in Southeast San Diego? Are you volunteering? What are you doing to make a difference to stop this racism, to make things a little bit more different for our children, for our grandchildren? And with that, I would like to offer the question of, with the legalities that are happening with the gang violence and the gang injunction, what is happening that is changing that within the open stance of it, I guess. What's happening with changing that whole thing legally? And that is my question to you guys.
Are you asking change for the better? I mean, are you asking about gang injunctions and gang practices? Well, I mean, this is my exact concern, which is that we could see this. I mean, what I've been talking about, the use of rap lyrics as evidence in criminal cases, that's a First Amendment issue. It's an artistic freedom issue. It's a race issue. It's a class issue. And it also deals with gang issues, as I said, here in California. And so unfortunately, to me, cases like Tiny Doos and others throughout California that involve gangs and the assumption about gangs really reflect sort of a perversion of rap on trial, because the cases I've mostly testified in have involved claims where lyrics are being used to show that a person is threatening behavior, right? That their lyrics are true. They're going to be engaging in this behavior as a threat. The case of Tiny Do to me is so troubling because it represents such a perversion of this practice, right? I mean, Tiny Do, prosecutors admitted he had nothing to do with these shootings, right? But this is where our obsession in California with combating gang violence, and by the way, I'm all for minimizing gangs. I'm not saying, that's a good thing, but our kind of obsession with doing that has led to very troubling practices, not just in terms of Tiny Do's case, but in terms of gang injunctions. I have a colleague at UC Irvine, Cheryl Maxon, who studies gang injunctions and their application and the constitutional issues that arise from these injunctions. I have colleagues that study gang databases, and one of the things they find is the number of errors in the gang databases that make it very troubling. So this is one of many practices related to gang activity in California where there's some slippage and problems, and we need to stop it immediately. And so my part is, anytime I can get involved in these cases and lend my expertise in terms of explaining that no, just because they have the word mob in their name as a rap group, right, doesn't mean they're a gang member. There's all these conventions. So it's not really addressing the problem on a global scale, but I feel very satisfied at the end of these cases when, if I've in any small way made a difference and had the jurors have information about rap music that has helped them make important decisions. And that's really all I want to do. I want to give jurors the ability to make sound decisions about evidence in the context of proper knowledge.
The database that we've been referring to, there was actually a lieutenant in Tiny Do's case that testified you would either have to die, move to another state, or go to jail for life to get off the gang database. So once you're on the gang database, there's no way off. There's actually no function to get you off. There is no person to take you off that name. There's no process. So we have elders in our community like Stacy Butler, who every weekend is on the corners with signs saying peace in Southeast, and he can't get off the Cal gangs. Listen, Mr. Pollard's shaking his head because he knows who I'm talking about, right? So we actually have a bill being authored by our own Assembly member, Shirley Weber, that's going to try to address some of those things. It's going to create some transparency, so if you can see you're on the list. Right now you don't know if you're on the list. You only know when you go to trial and all of a sudden there's all these injunctions slapped on you. It's going to hopefully create a legal avenue for people to advocate for themselves to get off the list. And it's also going to hopefully start analyzing the racial disparities. 1 in every 100 black people in San Diego are documented as gang members, right? So there's huge racial disparities in who makes it on that list.
I feel like an important point was brought up by this gentleman here. And he posed the question, what do we do about the people who see rap as a genre with a reputation that is so appalling in their eyes that they're unable to see past that context and be able to see it for what it is and not what they've been told.
Yeah.
Sorry. I had a bit of a suggestion to reach people. In the segment of what you were showing, you discussed a portion of lyrics that were shown out of context of rap, presented as country and presented as rap. Perhaps to show people who are unfamiliar and unwilling to accept rap as a genre, perhaps we could present them lyrics in the form of pure poetry, or perhaps as a written note, or even tell them beforehand, hey, this is from an artist who has some pretty dark, or I guess what's the word I'm looking for? I guess some.
Yeah, they have a lot to say.
Yeah.
That may not be so pretty, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that-
So, well, I mean, to address your last comment, so one of the things that's really fascinating to me is I've done several experiments. I didn't have time to talk about them today, but they've involved using different kinds of lyrics from different songs, that sort of thing. And there's Tiny Do. We have been able to replicate the findings of this experiment using very explicit lyrics, less explicit lyrics, using folk lyrics, using rap lyrics, using country lyrics. So it doesn't really matter. We've just done a bunch of different kinds of experiments. By the way, one of the other findings of this experiment that we did is we not only asked people to evaluate the lyrics themselves, but we had them evaluate the actual writer of the lyrics. And what was really fascinating to me were the characterizations of the artist if they were rap lyrics versus if they were country. We asked a series of questions about intelligence, personality, likability, right? And on every dimension, when those same lyrics were considered rap, the person scored much lower on likability, on IQ, right? People's perceptions, compared to when they were the very same lyrics, but they were country. So, I mean, that's extremely telling to me that you would have such unbelievable disparities. Now, if you ask people, I think they would say, oh, I don't have these views, I don't have these beliefs, and many people don't believe they have them. And this is why it's called implicit bias. The bias isn't necessarily explicit, but what we know from experimental research is that people hold these stereotypes. And one of the most common stereotypes is that young men of color from the inner city, especially rappers, are likely to be inherently dangerous and threatening. Those are things that go together in our mind. And that's because we have experimental research that shows us that. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of really fascinating studies that show us this. So until we begin to break these linkages and question these stereotypes and understand them, I mean, I think we're not going to get anywhere. And I think the implicit bias research has really revealed how much of this may not be explicit. You don't have jurors sitting there saying, look, I'm going to nail this person because they're a person of color. But what they're doing is they're seeing these videos, they're reading these rap lyrics without any context about rap music and saying, if this person could write this, if this person could make this video, they could do that behavior. And that's what's happening, and this is why so many defendants are being found guilty, because they're making that leap, right? So the question is, how do you sever those linkages? And that's a really challenging question.
So TD, we know we've talked a lot about what were some of the things that the DA, we were talking about how in your case, it wasn't that it was necessarily that no safety was a confession of the shootings that were tied to that case, but that you benefited as a rap artist from that. So what were some of the arguments that the district attorney or the character assassinations they were bringing against you to portray you a certain way through your music?
Okay, so excuse me for my tardiness. I didn't know this thing was going up.
I called TD when I was like,
it was last minute.
I was like, hey, college kid, there's complications. Do you want to come down to the museum?
Right. Okay. So basically, things that the district attorney was using against me was, like she was saying, my lyrics, and he basically said, first of all, he didn't even listen to the entire album. He only listened to one song on the album. And that song that he listened to, he said, you know, it wasn't an album full of love songs. Basically, I was talking about, you know, stuff that goes on in the inner city. Shootings, killings, robbing, like, you know, stuff, just different stuff like that. Because I used these lyrics and I talked about these things and crimes in my community, like, you know, that were taking place in my community. I rapped about, not specifically, but, you know, just talking about different stuff like that in general, that I could be, held liable for those crimes, and they felt like I should spend 56 years of life in prison for, just being the voice of my people. Yeah.
I said earlier that we should send Bonnie Dumanis a thank you card because she turned a gangster rapper into Malcolm X, and an activist. So can you talk to us a little bit about the direction of your music now, and how you're still Lincoln, you are who you are where you're from, but what are the realities that you talk about now, and what direction you see yourself as an artist?
Well, okay, so when I first came home, it took me a long time to even write a song, basically, right? Because for 7 months, I felt like music is what landed me in jail. So, of course, like anybody, never been to jail before, I've been to jail, but I hadn't stayed in jail for that long. I was kind of like, turned off the music. And then, I sat down with people like Paul and, Jess, and they just kind of told me, like, you can't stop being who you are because of people that don't understand. You have to speak out for your people. So I just put everything into that, and now the direction of my music is basically, I'm still on the same, I still talk the same stuff, but it's a message in my music now, just basically like telling, these kids out here, these men of color and kids of color, like, you got to be more smarter than what, you out here being, because, man, these people have something in store for you, It's higher powers working that, we can't control, so we got to be smarter at what we doing out here in these streets. So I'm just presenting it in a different way. I'm bringing it, on a more intelligent level than just talking about rims and paint and money. I'm talking about, social justice issues and things that are taking place in our community on a judicial level, not just, in the streets. Yeah.
Why do you think rap music's important to black people in Southeast?
Because it's like it's the story that it paints. It's like the what does Aaron call it? The movement. Yeah, it's basically, it's our story. It's who we are. As a people. Like, some people have country western, some people have blues. Like, my grandfather was a big blues fan. He listened to blues. He had dementia. And even in his dementia, he forgot my name, my cousin's names, my sister's names, but he never forgot the words to all the blues records that he liked. So it shows you the power that music has. And rap music, to me, is, in my generation, is that power. It's our blues, you know what I mean? And it just paints that picture and kind of gets us, like, I know it takes me to places where I ain't been for a while. So I might hear a rap song that I heard when, like, Gin and Juice. It takes me back to the 6th grade, when I hear it. So, that's the power of music. I feel like we should be able to voice those opinions because music has power. It does certain things to people,
Okay, this is the last question. What? I'm sure he'll stay after for autographs and all sorts of checks. Why do you think the judicial system goes after rap music? Why not Martin Scorsese?
Okay, I feel like, how I feel about that is that jurors, because when a district attorney comes and presents the case to the jury, right? 9 times out of 10, the jury is not of our peers, meaning young black males. It's just not. It doesn't happen that way. So you can scare a juror with, a middle-aged white woman or, middle-aged white man with, look at this gangster rapper. He's talking about killing, shootings, doing different things like that. As to where if you came in and said, hey, you got this 30-year-old white guy in here, and he's talking about shootings and killings, they're going to look at the 17-year-old black male and say, well, yeah, he comes from over here, he's a documented gang member, he's probably done some of those things that, that he's talking about in those music, as to where Martin Scorsese, he's like, yeah, right, he didn't do that. There's no way in the world he really, was involved in any of those shootings or anything. Come on now, this is not happening because they don't understand us. They don't understand where we come from. They don't understand our culture, and they don't understand how we live on a daily basis. So it's easy to say, let's just write him off and throw him away because, he's not with us. He's going to keep our streets safer. So, hey, let's just do it,
Thanks. I owe you.
Yeah.
I owe you.
For those of you who've been with us for nearly a year now for our Future 40 series, we want to say that we are honored and thank you for continuing to join us for these public conversations. Tonight's conversation is important because, as Charis said, we don't have the answers. But we think is really important for our Center for Civic Engagement is that we all feel comfortable engaging in the dialogue, having the conversation about race, about bias, about prejudice. These are all things that we think, and more importantly, opportunity. These are all of the things that we want for everyone in this room to be able to have comfort in having these conversations. I want to thank you for being here, the members of our board of directors who are with us tonight, all of our team, our staff for joining us tonight. And now I want to bring up to the microphone, and who created this series and tonight's conversation. Now I want to bring up to the microphone Micah Parzan, who you all know is the president and CEO of the Museum of Man. And Micah is going to tell us a little bit about what to expect from the experience at the Museum of Man tonight. Thank you all.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much to the San Diego Foundation on this amazing partnership. Thank you to our amazing staff at the San Diego Museum of Man, who you folks will get to know in a bit over at the reception and the tour. I wanted to just stop for a moment to really acknowledge the power of the conversation that is going on today. It is absolutely shocking and remarkable to me that here we are in Balboa Park, a place that is such a privileged landscape and has its own long history of racism, and we're able to start having conversations along these lines here. We were so thrilled with this partnership because it was exactly the way that we hoped the exhibit would start to create and hold a space for discourse of this nature. So thank you all for being here. I don't want to take up much time, but I do think it might be helpful to have a little bit of context about the exhibit. We initially leased it about 5 years ago from the American Anthropological Association. It was an exhibit that was about 10 to 15 years in the making. It spanned interdisciplinary fields. A lot of resources were poured into it, and the objective was really to start to address and undo the scientific racism that the field of anthropology in the early 1900s, late 1800s, before that and after that, really sort of got in motion. So it was anthropology's effort to say, we got it wrong the first time around, and now let's take a look and talk about race as a cultural construct. We leased the exhibit for about 3 months in early 2011, and it had a phenomenal impact on our organization. The philanthropic community rallied around it very quickly on short notice. Visitorship skyrocketed, and most importantly, it had an enormous impact on our visitors. And I'll tell you a very quick story. One day, 5 years ago, I was in the exhibit hall, and I saw an older white woman, and she was sitting on a bench. I went up and introduced myself, and I asked her how she liked the exhibit. She said, I loved it. My family and I are visiting from Wisconsin, and we've always been prejudiced against people of color. That's just how we were raised. And then she told me, I'm 86 years old, and I finally get it. Race just doesn't matter that much. And God put people on this earth for the same opportunity, and they should have that opportunity. Thank you so much. And we, of course, know race does matter an enormous amount. But for this one woman, it was a step in her journey that led to an epiphany to see people on an equal playing field, perhaps for the first time in her life. One of the things that has been most important for us as an organization at the Museum of Man is that the exhibit has been an enormous teacher for us. You cannot embrace and take on a topic such as race at a museum which also has a long history of privilege and racism and not take a long and hard look under your own hood. and really think about your complicity as an organization, as a larger piece of a larger landscape that has been complicit in such a long history of sweeping these kinds of issues under the rug and not addressing them in ways that give voice to the folks who are really affected. So our goal in bringing the exhibit was, and purchasing it, which we did, it had sort of entered into our DNA and made such an impact on who we are and what we stand for that we knew we wanted to purchase it, and we did. It opened about a year ago in April of last year. What you'll see today over in the exhibit hall at the museum after the reception or during is a phase one for us. We realized early on that this is just the very beginning of a long journey for the Museum of Man in terms of creating and holding this kind of space. Early on, we held 2 convenings where we brought together experts from throughout the community in race relations, educators, people working in civil rights, activists, folks who really were working on the ground of these kinds of issues, and we asked them to help us identify what are the shortcomings of this exhibit, where does it not deliver, what are the kinds of things we need to do, and how can we leverage it to really properly serve the community and the kind of space that we want to carve. That led to a phase 2, which will open in July of this year. I'm sorry you're not going to be able to experience that today, but I hope you'll come back again. It's in partnership with the Aja Project in City Heights, which many of you may know, a participatory youth project program that really invited young people to creatively talk about their experience with race and representation from communities, from their perspective, from communities in City Heights, in Barrio Logan, and in the Diamond neighborhoods. So finally, I'd just like to say that we at the Museum of Man are in the very early stages of trying to develop a new financial model and set of partnerships that would allow us to provide access to the race exhibit and workshops for all San Diego County middle and high school students at no cost. We feel that it's something that every secondary school student in San Diego should come see so that these kinds of conversations can occur in all sorts of nooks and crannies throughout our community. So with that, I would like to invite you all to accompany the San Diego Foundation staff along with the Museum of Man staff over to the museum. You're all welcome tonight or anytime you'd like to come. Please just reach out to us. We'll have a lovely reception and tours of the exhibit and the opportunity to enjoy it. Thank you, everybody.